1940. The Austin Motor Company works. Longbridge, Birmingham. A vehicle rolls off the production line that looks like it belongs on a high street, not a battlefield. It is a two-wheel drive truck chassis, wrapped in canvas, stretched over a timber frame painted khaki, with a red cross on each flank and no armour whatsoever. It carries no weapon. It mounts no gun. Its body can be punctured by a bayonet. The men who first inspected it were not impressed. It looked civilian. It looked soft. It would go on to serve in every single theatre of the Second World War. Over 13,000 would be built. Its crews would drive it through artillery barrages that stopped armoured vehicles, across minefields, onto invasion beaches, and into the gates of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. One captured example survived the entire Eastern Front, was recaptured by British forces in France, and was personally ordered home by Field Marshal Montgomery as proof of what it could endure. A future Queen of England would learn to drive and maintain one, and a generation of wounded soldiers would remember the inside of its canvas-covered compartment as the moment they knew they might survive. Its designation was the Austin K2/Y. The troops called it Katy, and it was the most important vehicle in the British Army that never fired a shot. To understand why the K2Y existed, you need to understand the problem Britain faced in 1939. The Royal Army Medical Corps had no dedicated military ambulance. Wounded men were being moved in whatever was available, often civilian vehicles requisitioned from councils and hospitals. The War Office needed a purpose-built ambulance that could be manufactured quickly, maintained cheaply, and operated across any terrain the army might fight on. Austin proposed adapting its existing K-30 civilian truck chassis, a proven 30 weight platform already on British roads. The coach builder Man Egerton of Norwich, a firm that had built bodies for Rolls-Royce motorcars since 1905, would construct the ambulance compartment to Royal Army Medical Corps specifications. The vehicle itself was a masterpiece of practical engineering. The heart was an Austin D-Series straight-six petrol engine displacing 3,462 cubic centimetres, producing 60 brake horsepower. That was modest, but it was reliable, and it ran on the same fuel as nearly every other vehicle in the British supply chain. The 4-speed manual gearbox drove the rear wheels only, a limitation that would haunt the vehicle in deep sand and mud but kept production simple and fast. The patient compartment measured 2.6 metres long, 2 metres wide and 1.7 metres high. It could carry 4 stretcher casualties on double-decked racks, or 10 seated wounded on folding benches. A small internal door connected the driver's cab to the rear compartment, allowing the attendant to check on casualties without stopping the vehicle. This single feature, a door between driver and patient, saved more lives than most people would ever understand. The compartment had a hot water heater for winter operations, an onboard tyre compressor for desert conditions, and a lead water tank for the wounded. The total unladen weight was 3,124 kilograms. Top speed was roughly 50 miles per hour. It carried 24 imperial gallons of fuel in 2 tanks. It had no armour, not a single plate. Its protection was a Red Cross and the Geneva Convention. Now, before we get into where this ambulance actually fought, if you are enjoying this deep dive into British wartime engineering, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. The K2Y's combat record begins with France in May 1940. Photographic evidence places it in France on the 9th of May, the day before the German invasion. At Dunkirk, one extraordinary story captures the chaos. A Polish driver abandoned his Katy on the beaches, smashing the ignition to immobilize it. The Germans seized it, rebuilt it with Bosch electrics and metal panels, bolted jerry can brackets to the sides, and pressed it into service as a Wehrmacht ambulance. That single vehicle then served across France, Germany and the Russian front, surviving the full winter of the Eastern Front. After D-Day, British forces recaptured it at the Battle of Comeux on August 20th, 1944. The body was riddled with shrapnel and bullet holes from multiple fronts, including one hole clean through the driver's door. The engine still ran. Montgomery ordered it shipped back to Austin's factory. In the Western Desert, K2Ys operated across Libya and Egypt from 1940 to 1943. The onboard tyre compressor proved essential for driving across sand. One veteran of the North African campaign managed to cram 27 wounded men into and onto a single Katy, with casualties seated on the wings, the bonnet and the rear steps. He was mentioned in dispatches. On D-Day, the ambulance was documented across the Normandy beaches. At the Mulberry Artificial Harbour at Arromanches, K2Ys drove along the pierhead to transfer wounded directly to hospital ships. Up to 500 casualties were evacuated daily by sea. The war diary of the 195th Air Landing Field Ambulance, which arrived by glider on the 6th of June, records the main dressing station being strafed from the air on several occasions. After shelling destroyed all jeeps and motorcycles parked nearby, the ambulances were the only survivors. The heavier vehicles around them were destroyed. the unarmoured ambulances endured. Lance Corporal Henry Harden of the Royal Army Medical Corps earned the Victoria Cross on January 23, 1945 during Operation Blackcock. Attached to a Royal Marine Commando troop, Harden went forward 120 yards into the open under fire from 4 enemy positions. He dressed the wounds of 3 men and carried one to safety. Ordered not to go forward again after tanks failed against anti-tank guns, he insisted. He brought back another casualty. He went out a 3rd time and was killed carrying a wounded officer to cover. His citation describes complete contempt for personal danger and an example that would never be forgotten. In April 1945, men of the 11th Light Field Ambulance used K2Ys to evacuate typhus-stricken inmates from Bergen-Belsen. By the 2nd of May, 6,500 of the sick had been moved to hospital. The ambulance that looked civilian had driven into the worst place on earth. The K2Y's most direct rival was the American Dodge WC-54. On paper, the Dodge was superior. It had 4-wheel drive against the Austins too. It produced 76 horsepower against 60. Its enclosed sheet metal body offered better protection against weather and shrapnel. When the British wheeled vehicle experimental establishment tested one in mid-1943, they concluded it offered superior performance, but the K2Y carried 10 seated casualties against the Dodge's 7. It had the internal access door. It had the purpose-built medical features, the water tank, the tyre compressor, and it was available 2 full years earlier, in service from 1940, while the Dodge entered production in 1942. In the years that mattered most, when Britain stood alone, the Katy was there. The Dodge was not. The K2Y achieved cinematic immortality in the 1958 film Ice Cold in Alex, based on the novel by Christopher Landon, who served with the 51st Field Ambulance in North Africa. The film follows an ambulance crew driving a Katy 700 miles from Tobruk to Alexandria. It won the International Critics Award at the Berlin Film Festival, and its famous final scene was later used in Carlsberg television advertisements, making the K2Y the only wartime ambulance to appear in a beer commercial. Approximately 50 K2Ys survive today. The Imperial War Museum at Duxford holds one. Airfix released a 1/35th scale model kit, 1940, Longbridge, Birmingham. A vehicle rolls off the production line wrapped in canvas over timber, carrying no weapon, mounting no armour, protected by nothing but a red cross and the courage of its crew. It was underpowered. It was 2-wheel drive in a 4-wheel drive war. Its body could be torn open by shrapnel that would bounce off a scout car, and yet it worked. It worked on the beaches of Dunkirk. It worked in the sand of Libya. It worked on the invasion beaches of Normandy. It worked in the jungles of Burma and through the gates of Bergen-Belsen. 13,102 were built. They carried men who could not carry themselves, driven by crews who drove toward the sound of guns with nothing between them and the enemy but canvas and conviction. The Austin K2Y was not a weapon of war. It was its opposite, and